if you're out there. Give me a shout, give me a holler. Um, so yeah, today I was actually kind of struggling for something that I really wanted to talk about, but this word came to mind, and oftentimes I think to me anyway, I think of piousness, of really devout religiousness when I think of righteousness, right? Because it's one of these things that if you think about the opposite of the word, right? What's the opposite of righteousness? It's wicked, it's sinful, you know, it's not pious, it's unreasonable, it's all of these things, right? And I was thinking, well, what does righteousness really mean to me, right? Or to those of you out there, I don't know. It's good, it's virtuous, it's honorable, it's upstanding, it's what else can I say? Honesty. It's I wouldn't say irreproachable because although that may be a synonym for it, um, but righteousness is a it can be a loaded term really. And I think a lot of people like me, maybe rightly or wrongly, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, associate this sort of um, self-righteousness, right, with these TV evangelists, these people who just come across as really fake, right? They may be really strong believers in what it is that they're talking about, but they do come across as really, really fake. And I guess I watch a lot of John Oliver and shows like that, so I do have a bit of a cynicism around these kind of self-righteous and righteous sort of preachers that deliver this message of sort of you know we are God-fearing, we are justifiable in everything that we do because we're righteous people. Um, and I think that from my perspective, and today I'm just a little bit more casual, even more casual than I am most days. I'm gonna drink my coffee, which I still have here. It's gone cold, but I'm still drinking it. And you know, uh, and I just think about this whole moral correctness behind righteousness. What is righteousness all about? Is it morally right? Is it is it morally justifiable? Um, I just don't know. I was asking sort of in the box here, what do you feel about righteousness? I mean, what's your sort of um, discernment or definition of righteousness? What does it mean to you? Um, you know, I guess one of the reasons why it came to mind was because of kind of what's going on in the world in terms of how people are responding to the sort of reopening of our society. And one of the critical things that a lot of people are demanding is that we reopen churches and synagogues, places of worship, because there is this sort of sense that people are being denied their right to practice their religions and things like that. And that keeping them out of church and out of synagogue or mosque or whatever is an unsustainable thing. And there is this sense that you know there is a moral obligation to people to allow them to pursue their religions and things like that. So I guess in my sense that this view that righteousness is being uncorrupted or morally justifiable or morally right, morally correct, um, is something that I really hadn't thought about, hadn't really considered in terms of what people are missing out on in their lives. You know, and like I said, I don't know whether there's this sort of specific piousness behind it, or whether it's actually something that we can exercise just as individuals, as moral individuals, and a lot of what we've been doing in this period of staying at home and self-isolating is actually an exercise in righteousness. We are being morally, cautious and justified in our approach to to what we've done in terms of preserving our society. I mean, it's now obviously people are anxious to get back to work, get back to business. There's a lot of mom and pop shops that are really suffering, and I really do empathize with them. I have friends who run restaurants and who are suffering from financial ruin potentially. So I think that right now we have this opportunity to take our sort of belief systems and bring them to sort of the forefront of everything that we're doing, and whatever those belief systems are. I mean, let's face it, most people have a belief system that allows them or sort of compels them to to be moral, to be morally justified in what they do. And I had this real struggle with the people who were turning up at city and county and state building steps with guns, right? I have a real issue with that, because morally I find it incomprehensible and reprehensible that armed mobs can basically force their will on other people. But I do understand and I do get what they're trying to achieve. They're saying, look, hey, we feel like we're not being listened to. We're not being acknowledged in our pain and our suffering, right? A lot of these people are just trying to put food on their own tables, right? They're trying to feed their kids. They're trying to get their kids, through the education system. And they feel like they're being squashed or trampled on, their rights, their right to go out and make a living, their right to go out and, get food for their families, their right to have their children educated. So I do understand that. But is there a principled righteousness? Is there a moral sort of right for them to go and do what they're doing? That's what really got me thinking about this question about what is righteousness and what's it all about, and where it sits with me. So so I'm just curious. I mean, from my perspective, a righteous person is somebody who basically practices what they preach, lives by their own moral standards, right? The Dalai Lama, for instance, I don't know a huge amount about that, his person or his belief system, but I do know that he's a morally upright person, and he's a morally righteous person. Mother Teresa, she wasn't a perfect person, right? She was apparently, a bit of a taskmaster and was not very well loved by all of the people who knew her, but she was revered for her moral, code and her moral, principles, and that bit of about her, that righteousness that she, in the way that she lived, right? She lived to serve others, and that's what I really feel like, like we need to have more of in society. We need more virtuous people in society, in our society. We need more virtue in business. We need more virtue in in our day-to-day dealings, honesty and openness. What I call morally justifiable actions, right? So we need our morals to dictate what it is that that we're doing, and that's what I really truly feel righteousness is all about. And see, from my perspective, righteousness is akin to what I've said all along in all of these talks, and that is that righteousness is all about love. It's all about loving and caring, right? Being a loving person and caring about others in society, and being basically morally justified in your approach to how you address and deal with others, and how you manage relationships with others. Um, that's what makes righteousness, kind of a real thing to me. It's not about being pious or God-fearing, like you see these TV evangelicals. They're always consciously and consistently talking about righteousness, and basically what it is in the in the in the Bible or whatever. I'm not talking about that sort of definition of righteousness. They choose to pass that message on to their followers, and that's great. I think that that anybody who wants to live by a moral code or a moral standard, set of moral standards, is a beautiful thing. And I'm like, and I'm not saying that the righteous that I'm talking about is the whole like hang loose, dude, it's all righteous. It's not that kind of thing either, right? It's not going back to Finding Nemo and talking about surfing or anything like that. What I'm talking about is this whole sort of virtuous, upright, upstanding kind of approach to everything, to all dealings with all people, right? If we're morally upright, if everything that we do in all our dealings with other people are honorable and with good intention, that's really, to me, what I believe is what righteousness is all about. And and I think there's a lot of good, upstanding people who have a really sort of solid moral approach to their lives, and who have ethics, and who are ethical in all of their dealings. They're not irreproachable, they're not perfect, but they are ethically bound by their their conscience, and they're good people. And I think that that's one of the things that that really struck me in my thought process when I thought back about all of these protests about opening up states and things like that. Is there are different perspectives, right? And I chose to view what was going on from my own perspective, rather than empathizing really with those people in that moment. And I felt frustration, and I felt anger, and I felt fear, and not for me particularly, or for anyone that I know personally, but for the whole of our society. I thought that the demands were unreasonable. I thought that the people were unreasonable. And I felt that they were, not being, I thought they were being self-righteous, and indignant, rather than actually being morally upstanding. But the more I look at it, and the more that I take a different view and perspective, the more I actually can see from their perspective and their point of view that they were being righteous in their protesting. They weren't being cautious. They weren't being particularly caring in terms of their the preservation of others, rather than their own self-preservation, which people put themselves at risk all the time. We put ourselves at risk every time we get behind the wheel of a car, every time we step off the curb to cross the road. We're constantly putting our lives in peril, right? So just because somebody decided to go protest on the state steps without a mask on, doesn't make them any different than somebody who's driving in a car that's going too fast on the freeway, right? It's the same sort of concept. So from that perspective, so I kind of had these thought processes, and I don't know if any of you read my blog post from just over a week ago. New one came out today, widowersway.com, if you haven't seen it. And that's, my blog posts are really how I'm feeling in the moment. Okay, I generally tend to write them off the cuff. I don't have a I used to have a set plan of what it is that I wanted to write about, themes, things that were kind of festering within me that I wanted to talk about. But these last few, certainly the last sort of 4 or 5, have been really off the cuff and in the moment. And I want to publicly apologize to Christy, because she feels like I've relegated her to second class, behind where she should be in my life, or where she really is in my life. And so I'm sorry, Christy, if I've made you feel like you're less than what you are to me. From that perspective, I have kind of used my own sort of self-righteousness to defend myself in terms of how I've characterized this new relationship that I have since losing Suzanne. And it's really difficult for me to want to kind of keep my private life private, but my have this public persona. And so I guess in my own self-righteousness, in my own sort of kind of unjustifiable way, I've mischaracterized my feelings and my thoughts about my relationship with Christy. So I apologize to her, and I also want to say that this whole thing about doing these daily broadcasts has been more of an exercise in me committing to to a concept of creating community, rather than trying to push out some sort of political or personal message, right? So I just wanted to sort of clarify where I'm maybe I have been self-righteous and unreasonable, rather than righteous and reasonable in my approach to these talks. And I just wanted to make sure that people really understand, those of you who watch me every day, those of you who drop in and see me, or those of you who watch after I've broadcast, I just want you to know that there's no malintention. There's no intention to try and convince you of any sort of agenda that I may have. I don't. There is no agenda here. It's simply a matter of me offering up my my love and my kindness and my empathy and my compassion for the world, for everybody out there. And it's funny because just not even it may not even been a week ago, I was calling names, calling these people who were out there protesting names with bells on. And I also have used a pet nickname for somebody that I completely disagree with, morally, ethically, personally, professionally, and I've realized that that's wrong. It's not the righteous. It's not the kind or loving or caring thing to do. So I will stop using those terms to describe others, because it makes me no different than them, because they choose to use names or call names of people or whatever. And in the heat of the moment, it's often difficult to sort of restrain and put that filter on. But part of the whole idea behind sort of emotional intelligence is self-regulation, and I'm now really trying to bring that back into my existence, right? Into my own influence, right? Because I talk about being able to regulate our emotions, being able to regulate our, at least, acknowledge and observe our own thoughts, right? And understand our feelings. So by doing all of that, right, we can be more virtuous. We can be morally upright and honorable and moral people, right? So that does make us more righteous in very many ways, right? And I'm, like I say, I'm not referring to this sort of religious, sort of righteousness that we hear about in our places of worship. I'm talking about our own sort of righteousness as individuals, as virtuous human beings, right? The fact that we have this unlimited capacity to love and to care and to to provide space and compassion for people, for other people, for people we love, even people we don't love, right? Love thy enemy as thyself, right? And that is really true. That's what a righteous person will do. And it's not just the prophets, it's not just people, the Bible that teaches us to do these things. It's I'm reminded of the quote in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just good business, right? It's just good for your person, right? To be a morally righteous person, to be upstanding, to be principled, and in this space where you're trying to, in effect, be non-judgmental and be irreproachable in your thoughts, in your thought processes, right? It's hard to get there. It's not impossible, but it's hard to get there. There are people out there who are what I would describe as extremely righteous individuals. I think I mentioned like Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama. Yes, they are spiritual leaders. They are religious people. But, there are non-spiritual, non-religious people who are very righteous as well. I have a really, really good friend who is quite often on these, watching these, Tigre, who I believe is a very righteous individual. He's, he's not completely faultless, but he's an honorable, principled, morally upstanding person, in my opinion. And because of that, I see him as a very righteous person, but he's not what I would describe as a religious person. So it's those kinds of people that I have enormous amounts of respect for, and who I admire, because I believe they live their lives from a place of love and authenticity, right? And that's also part of it, is this this whole thing about righteousness is it also encompasses our love, not just for self but for others, and authenticity, not just from ourself but authenticity in all of our dealings with others. That makes us a really righteous kind of person, right? So I guess that's kind of where I was coming from today. And I don't know whether this is the most exciting or riveting subject that I've ever talked about, but it just kind of creeped up on me this morning, and I just wanted to I looked up the definition, and I thought to myself, well, there's a lot of people I know who are, like this, and who aren't necessarily, super religious, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. That even the people that I may disagree with, right, in terms of their politics, their approach to life, their way of living, right, that doesn't make them any less righteous or moral or upstanding than me, right? So from that perspective, I have had a shift in my own thought processes around what's happening. And I do hope that as we come to the close of what I believe is week 8 for many states of this sheltering in place. Here in California, there's still some regulations that are in place that are going to prevent people from sort of unnecessary movement and travel until possibly even July to prevent the spread of the virus. So there's going to be a lot more time of this whole shelter in place thing. And I wanted to actually just acknowledge one other thing that just popped into mind, and that is the what I describe as the righteousness of some companies, right? There's a real contrast going on between what I would describe as the battle of the billionaires. One billionaire has reopened his factory despite being cautioned and warned against it because of the close proximity of the workers and the potential spread of the virus within his factory. And on the other hand, there's another one, I don't know whether he's a billionaire or not, but anyway, he's basically told his staff that, if they want to come back into the office once the office reopens, they are perfectly welcome to, but they don't have to ever again, right? He's given them that option of working from home forever. They're different kinds of businesses. One's manufacturing, one is online, but the reality is that, there's got to be this sort of balance rather than this dichotomy of harshness versus complete looseness and relaxedness. So which of those two is right? Which of those two is the more righteous? Which is the more virtuous of the two bosses? Who am I to judge? I don't know. One wants to get his factory up and running. The other wants to, continue his business as, he's discovered it is capable of being run from, this sort of scenario. So, I don't know. One's an innovator and leader. The other is maybe not so innovative and not a great leader. I don't know. Only time will tell which kind of methodology, or maybe a hybrid of both methodologies would work. I don't know. Anyway, so that's me today. I really appreciate you guys indulging me. This was a real pure indulgence one today. I'm sorry if it wasn't the most, like I say, riveting of conversation pieces, but I do believe that righteousness is something that we are all capable of, all doing in our lives. And I appreciate you guys coming and joining me. I thank you very much. And I will be back live tomorrow, probably with a bit better of a Friday subject than what I've picked today. So thank you again for joining me. Hope to see you again tomorrow, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. Thanks a lot for joining me. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.